She put the folder on the kitchen table and slid it toward me with 2 fingers. The way you push something you don't want to touch for long. Then she said the sentence I'd been hearing for 6 years. Sign it, honey. Family doesn't send invoices. 6 years. I slept on a cot beside my grandmother's bed. 6 years of turning a grown woman every 2 hours so her skin wouldn't break down. And I was never paid $1 for a single one of those nights. Here is what the woman across that table already knew. And I didn't. The state had been paying for those nights. The whole time. $960 a month, every month, deposited into a bank account, with my name on the front of it, and somebody else's hand on the money. And here is the part that turned me from the girl on the cot into the person who ended it. Today I read timesheets for a living. I audit in-home caregiver hours for the state. I am the one who finds the hours that were billed and never worked. Last spring, I finally requested the file with my own name in it. Nobody handed it to me by accident. I asked for it on a form, like anybody can. My name is Nora Keene. I am 36 years old, and I live 20 minutes from the house where I gave away most of my 20s. If you've ever been the family member everybody counted on, and nobody counted, stay with me. There is a notebook in this story, and by the end of it, that notebook is going to mean the opposite of what it meant when I started writing in it. And if you were the one who slept in the chair, or on the couch, or on a cot beside somebody else's mother, comment the word cot. I want to see how many of us there are. I have a guess. I hope I am wrong. Now let me take you back, one time only, to the beginning of it. 6 years and 2 months before that morning, I carried 2 garbage bags of clothes up the front steps of my grandmother's house. On the east side of Erie, Pennsylvania. I was 29. I had a Toyota with a check engine light that had been on so long I'd stopped seeing it. A job doing intake at a dental office. And a boyfriend who lasted 4 more months. My grandmother's name was Rosie. She was 81. 6 weeks before I moved in, she'd had a stroke on the bathroom floor and lain there most of a night before the mail carrier noticed the storm door standing open. My aunt organized the family meeting about it. My aunt organizes everything. Her name is Cheryl, and she is not a villain, the way people mean when they say that word. She is the one who brings a casserole to a funeral before anybody's asked. She is the one with the folder. She is calm. She is prepared. She is always concerned about you. And by the time you notice what she has done, it is already notarized. At that meeting, she had a legal pad with everybody's name on it, and a column beside each name. My mother's column said, weekends when possible. My uncle in Arizona had a column that said, calls. My column was blank because I was the one without children, without a mortgage, and without, as Cheryl put it that night, anything really keeping me anywhere? She said it kindly. That is the thing I need you to understand about her. She never once raised her voice at me in 6 years. Not one time. Nora could move in, she said. It is the loving thing. And it is free. Free. She used that word at the table, in front of 6 people, and not one of them turned their head. I said yes, in about 4 seconds. I want to be honest about that, because I've had 5 years to be angry at everybody in that room, and I've had to make room in there for myself. Nobody drugged me. Nobody forged anything that night. I said yes, because I loved that old woman, and because being needed felt like being chosen. And if you've ever confused those 2 things, you know exactly how fast a person can say yes to 6 years of her life. The first week was almost nice. Then the second week I learned what 2-hour turns actually are. You do not sleep for 6 hours and get up once. You sleep in 90-minute pieces, forever. You set a timer because your body will lie to you about how long you've been down. That timer is going to matter. So let me put it in your hand now. It was a wind-up kitchen timer, white plastic, shaped like an egg, with a dial that went to 60 minutes, and a hairline crack across the face from before I was born. It had lived on my grandmother's stove, my whole childhood, timing her rolls. I moved it to the nightstand and started using it to time a person. 2 hours. Wind it back. Turn her hip. Check the pad. 2 hours. Wind it back. It ran out roughly 4,000 times in that house. I could hear it winding down in my sleep, and there are still nights I hear it now. In an apartment where that timer sits on a shelf and does not tick anymore. 2 months after I moved in, Cheryl came by on a Tuesday morning with the folder and a pen and a travel mug of coffee she'd brought for me, which was new. She put down 4 documents. She explained each one in that patient, unhurried way she has. The way somebody reads a bedtime story they've read 100 times. The first was a power of attorney, which is just a paper that lets one person sign for another. My grandmother's shaky signature was already on it, dated 2 days earlier. From a morning I hadn't been home. Cheryl's name was in the blank underneath. The second was a bank form, adding Cheryl to my grandmother's checking account. The third was a change of address card. The fourth one is the one this whole story rides on, and at the time, it was the most boring piece of paper on that table. It was a provider enrollment form. In plain words, an application to be an official paid caregiver in the state's home care program. The part of the system that will pay a family member to do the work a nursing home would otherwise get paid to do. Cheryl called it just the paperwork, so the county can send a nurse out. I signed it. My real signature, my real hand. No forgery, no trick. That page is the only page in this entire story that I actually signed. And I want you to hold on to that, because 4 years later, a woman in a state office is going to hold it up next to 68 other pages and ask me one question. I asked her. I did ask, and I've replayed this so many times. I can hear my own voice being too polite. I asked whether there was any money in it for me. Anything. At all. Because I'd just cut my dental office hours to 12 a week, and my car insurance was due. She capped the pen. She put her hand over mine, on the table, and she said it, for the first time. Oh, honey, family doesn't send invoices. Then she took the folder and the 4 signed pages in it, and she drove away, and I went back inside and wound the timer. Stay with me. That coffee she brought me was the only thing that woman ever gave me that she didn't get back with interest. 4 years before that morning, my grandmother fell trying to get to the bathroom on her own. At 2:40 a.m., she didn't break anything. She landed on her side against the doorframe, and I got to her in about 11 seconds, because I'd started sleeping on top of the blanket instead of under it. The visiting nurse came out 2 days later and wrote one sentence in her notes that I copied into my own notebook, because I was so relieved somebody official had finally written it down. The bed was the problem. My grandmother needed a hospital bed, the kind with rails and a motor that raises the head, and the twin she'd had since Eisenhower was going to put her on that floor again. So, I called Cheryl. I want to describe this call exactly, because it is the moment I stopped being family in that house and became overhead, and neither of us said anything ugly. I told her the nurse's recommendation. I told her the rental was about $200 a month. With the delivery, there was a pause on her end, the kind where you can hear somebody put a hand over the phone. Then she said, "Nora, I am going to be straight with you because I respect you. There is just nothing there right now. Nothing there My grandmother owned that house free and clear. She had a pension from 31 years at the plastics plant on East 12th, and I had watched Cheryl deposit checks at the drive-through window, with my grandmother dozing in the back seat, but there was nothing there. We moved the twin bed against the wall, and I slept on the cot between the bed and the door, so that if she went down again, she'd go down on me. 11 weeks after that phone call, Cheryl pulled into the driveway in a new Buick. She was embarrassed about it, which was worse. She said the old one had needed a transmission, and it just made more sense. She said, "It is really a very basic model." Twice, I made her a cup of tea in my grandmother's kitchen and told her it was a nice color. If you have ever had to be gracious to somebody who is spending money you earned right in front of you, in a room you are not allowed to be tired in, you know what that tastes like. It doesn't taste like anger. Anger's clean. It tastes like being polite while something in your chest quietly files a report. Here's the part I didn't know. For another 4 years. By the time that Buick was in the driveway, the state had already sent 17 payments to a bank account with my name on the front of it. 17 months of $960. And I was measuring out my grandmother's stool softener in the dark with a headlamp because I didn't want to wake her by turning on the light. That detail matters later. Remember the headlamp. I need to tell you about the notebook now, because it starts here, and because it is the only weapon I ever built without knowing I was building it. The visiting nurse, she was there maybe 6 times total, a role in this story, not a person I ever really knew, told me to keep a log. Every dose, every time, every bowel movement, every meal, every fall, every visitor. She said it in a bored voice, the way you tell somebody to floss. I bought a blue spiral notebook at the drugstore on Buffalo Road for $1.79, and because I am the kind of person who does the boring thing correctly, I kept it. Not for a month, for 5 years and 11 months. 241 pages. Both sides. Date, time, dose, initials. Every night. Wound around the timer. 10 p.m. 2 capsules. 12:15 a.m. Turned right side. 2 a.m. Turned left. 4 a.m. Up to the toilet, 1 assist. 6 a.m. Blood sugar, 128. Nobody asked to see it. Not once in 6 years did a single member of my family open that notebook. It filled up and I bought another one, same brand, same blue cover, and by the end there were 4 of them in a shoebox under the cot. And I want you to picture that shoebox, because in about 20 minutes, a woman with a state identification badge is going to put on gloves to touch it. 2 years before that morning, I got offered a way out. And I said no. And I said no because of a sentence. The dental office I'd worked at before, all this had a billing supervisor who liked me. She called me on a Thursday afternoon and told me they had a full-time medical billing position opening in September. Day shift. Benefits. $22 an hour to start. And they'd pay for the coding certificate. I did the math standing in my grandmother's pantry, with the phone against my ear. I remember exactly what I was looking at, which was 3 cans of cream of mushroom soup and a bag of rice. And then I called Cheryl to ask if we could hire somebody for even 3 days a week, so I could take it. She listened to the whole thing. She let me finish. That is one of her techniques, and I only learned to recognize it later. She never interrupts, because a person who is allowed to finish feels like a person who has been heard. And then, you can tell them no and they'll thank you. She said, "Of course you should take it. You are not a prisoner, Nora." Then, 4 seconds later, in exactly the same voice, she said, "We just have to look at a facility for her," which, I mean, financially, We'd have to sell the house. And honestly, at her stage, they'd have her in a shared room. But nobody's going to blame you. You've given a lot. Nobody's going to blame you. I called the billing supervisor back that night and told her I couldn't. She said the offer would probably come around again. It didn't. You know that thing where somebody hands you a choice that isn't one, and then congratulates you on making it. That is not a fight. There is nothing to fight. She never said no to me. She just made sure. The yes cost my grandmother a bed in a shared room. That fall, my mother came for Thanksgiving and stayed 2 hours and 40 minutes. She hugged me in the kitchen and told me I looked tired and that I should really take care of myself. And she meant it. And she left before the dishes. And I stood at that sink at 8 p.m. with my hands in water that had gone cold. And I did not cry because I had a timer to wind. That is the only time in this whole story I got close. And I want you to notice it now so you'll believe me later. When I tell you exactly where and when I finally did. 8 months before that morning, 2 things arrived in that house within a week of each other. One of them was hospice. The other one was the only person in this story who ever looked directly at me. Her name is Bev. She was the hospice aide, 61 years old, forearms like a bricklayer, and she came 3 mornings a week to bathe my grandmother, so I could take a shower with the door closed. Hospice, in plain words, is what they call it when everybody stops trying to fix the person and starts trying to make the time comfortable. Nobody in my family said the word out loud for the first 3 weeks. Cheryl called it the extra help. Bev, on her second morning in that house, looked at the cot. Then she looked at the shoebox under the cot. Then she looked at me. She said, "How long have you been on that thing?" I said, 5 years-ish. She didn't gasp. She didn't say, I was a saint. Saint is what people call you, right before they leave you somewhere. She just kept folding the towel she was holding. And she said the sentence I have carried in my pocket every day since. Everybody in this house is counting her hours. Honey, nobody's counting yours. I said something like, well, that is how it is. Bev said, and she put the towel down and went in to my grandmother, and that was it. She never brought it up again. She didn't try to fix me. She just said the true thing once and let it sit in the room with me for 8 months. I didn't know it yet, but somebody in that house was already counting my hours. On paper, in pencil, and I wouldn't find out for another 5 years. Stay with me, because that is the thing that broke me open at the end. And it isn't the money. 3 weeks before that morning, my grandmother was lucid for about 40 minutes in the late afternoon, which happens, and which nobody warns you about, because it feels like a gift, and it is usually a goodbye. She was clear. She knew the year. She asked about my car, and then she said, out of nothing, "Are they paying you?" I said, "Grandma, don't worry about that." She got a look on her face that I hadn't seen since I was 9 years old, and had lied to her about a broken dish. She said, "Nora, count it." I thought she was confused. I said, "Okay, Grandma." I wound the timer. She went back under an hour later, and after that, there wasn't another 40 minutes like it. Count it. I thought it was the illness talking. It was an instruction. She died on a Sunday afternoon in March, and I was holding her right hand, and the timer was on the nightstand with 11 minutes left on it, and I let it run out. That is the last time I ever wound it. The funeral was Wednesday. Cheryl handled it, of course, beautifully, with a laminated program and a slideshow. And there were 51 people in that church. And in the family remarks, my aunt thanked everyone who pitched in these last few years. Everyone who pitched in. I sat in the second row in a dress I'd bought that morning at the outlet on Peach Street with a card I was hoping would go through. And Bev sat 4 rows back on the aisle in her work clothes, because she'd come straight from a shift, and she was the only person in that building who knew what a 2-hour turn is. Now here is that morning. This is the center of everything, so I am going to give it to you the way I gave it. Later, to a woman with a badge. Minute by minute. Thursday, the day after the funeral. 6:11 a.m. I know the time because I was awake on the cot with my phone in my hand. And I had been awake since 4, because my body still expected to get up at 4, and it would keep expecting that for another 2 years. I heard a car in the driveway. Then the front door with the key. Cheryl came into the back bedroom in a coat with the folder, and she was surprised to see me lying there, which tells you something. She had come at 6:11 in the morning, expecting the house to be empty. She said, "Oh, you are still here." I said, "Good morning." She said, "Well, it is actually good. We can knock this out." She went to the kitchen and started the coffee maker in a house where a woman had died 5 days before, and she called out to me about the storm windows. And I got up and put on a sweatshirt over the shirt I'd slept in, and I sat down at that kitchen table for the last time in my life. The folder had 3 things in it. The first was a printed inventory of my grandmother's household items, and beside 4 lines, somebody had already written, "See, the dining set, the good dishes, a chest of drawers, and a wall clock." The second was a listing agreement for the house, with a realtor's business card stapled to the corner, dated the previous Friday. My grandmother had been alive. On the previous Friday, she had been alive, and someone had been signing a listing agreement. The third was a single page with 2 paragraphs, and a signature line at the bottom, with my name typed under it. It said that in exchange for the sum of $2,000, I released any and all claims arising out of my residence at the property, and my care of the decedent, and agreed that all sums received in connection with her care had been properly disbursed. All sums received. I read that line 4 times. I remember the coffee maker making the noise coffee makers make at the end, and the light humming in flat and gray over the sink, and my hand flat on the table beside that page. I asked her, "What sums?" And my Aunt Cheryl, who has never once raised her voice at me, said, "It is boilerplate, honey. Every estate does one." She slid it another inch toward me with 2 fingers. "Sign it. Family doesn't send invoices." I have thought about that morning for 5 years, and I still cannot tell you why that was the sentence that did it, when I had heard it maybe 200 times. Maybe because my grandmother had been dead 5 days, and it was 6:11 in the morning, and there was a for sale listing dated while she was still breathing. Maybe because all sums received is a strange phrase to put in a paper for a woman who has received nothing. I didn't argue. I want to be clear about that, because people expect a scene here and there isn't one. I said, "I am not going to sign this today." She said, "Nora," I said, "I am not going to sign it today." And she looked at me for about 3 seconds with an expression I had genuinely never seen on her face. And then she put it all back in the folder and said, "Fine, we'll do it when you are in a better place emotionally." And she poured herself the coffee she had made in my grandmother's kitchen. I went into the back bedroom, and I put 4 things in a laundry basket: my clothes, my headlamp, the shoebox with the 4 blue notebooks in it, and the egg timer off the nightstand, which was not mine, and which I took anyway, and which is the only thing I have ever stolen in my life. I walked out the front door at, I think, 6:40 a.m. I had $41 in checking, and a car with a check engine light. Bev was in the driveway. She had come by to pick up the hospice equipment, the rented overbed table and the shower chair, and she was loading them into a van in the cold. She looked at the laundry basket, She looked at me. She didn't ask a single question. She opened her passenger door and took a coffee out of the cup holder, hers still full, and handed it to me through the window. And she said, "Sit in the car a minute before you drive." I sat in my car in my grandmother's driveway with a stranger's coffee, and that is where I cried. Once. Haya Belwand. Once. Alone. 14 minutes in a driveway. At 6:50 in the morning. With a laundry basket. In the passenger seat. That is the only time in this entire story. Not at the funeral. Not later, in the room where the whole thing came apart. Where you'd expect it. There. In a driveway. Before any of it made sense. If you have ever left a house with less than you carried into it, and had to sit down in your own car before you could drive, you know that 14 minutes. Nobody sees it. There is no witness. It is just you and the steering wheel, and a life that has suddenly got nothing on the schedule. If this story is your story too, subscribe before the next part, because the next part is the part I didn't think I got to have. Now, I am going to move fast, because the next 4 years are not the story. They're the tuition. 6 weeks after I left, I was living in a residential motel on the west side that charged $240 a week and had a hot plate. I got a job in the laundry at a nursing home on the night shift, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., because my body still woke up at 4 anyway, and I figured I might as well get paid for being awake. 8 sheets to a cart. 96 carts a night. Bleach cracked my knuckles until they bled at the joint, and I taped them. And here is the thing that nobody tells you about that kind of work. It was the easiest job I'd had in 6 years. Nobody in that laundry room needed me to be a good person. At 3 a.m., in a basement, folding hospital sheets, I could put a load in and stand there, and not be responsible for whether a woman lived until morning. 9 months after I left, I signed up for the medical billing and coding certificate at the community college, Tuesday and Thursday nights. $210 a month I did not have. I paid for the first semester with the deposit back from the motel, when I finally got an apartment with a door that locked. Here is what you need to know about medical billing. In plain words, because it is the whole back half of this story. A bill from a hospital or a home care agency isn't a price. It is a claim. It is a document that says a specific person did a specific thing at a specific time. And every claim has a paper behind it that somebody signed. I was good at it, in a way that embarrassed me. Turns out if you spend 6 years writing down every dose at every hour with your initials beside it, in a blue notebook nobody ever reads, you have accidentally been in training. 2 years after I left, I was a billing clerk at a family practice clinic on the east side, 40 hours, sitting down with a chair that had a back on it. 3 years after I left, I took a state job. Program Integrity. That is the department's name for it. And here is what it actually means. When the state pays somebody to take care of somebody else at home, somebody has to check that the hours on the timesheet are hours that really happened. That is the job. I read timesheets. I wend. I compare them to visit notes and hospital admissions, and, sometimes, obituaries. The first week of training, a supervisor put a slide up on the wall about the most common kind of fraud in the program. It is not stolen identities from strangers. It is not organized crime. It is a relative. It is a relative who enrolls a family caregiver, redirects the deposits to an account they control, and signs the timesheets themselves. I sat in the back of that training room with a state-issued laptop and a paper cup of coffee, and I did not move, and the woman next to me was writing notes about badge access, and I read that slide maybe 9 times, and then I went back to my desk and did my job for 11 more months before I did anything about it. Because I was afraid of being wrong, and because part of me still believed there'd been nothing there. Last spring, on a Monday, I did the least dramatic thing in this entire story. I filled out a form. Any person enrolled as a provider in that program can request their own provider record, not as an employee, as a citizen, about themselves, the same way you can ask a hospital for your own chart. There is a form. It takes about 4 minutes. There is a box for your name, a box for the last 4 digits of your social security number, and a box that asks what you are requesting. And in that box I wrote all enrollment documents, payment history, and submitted timesheets associated with my provider number. Then I did the second thing, which is the reason I get to tell you this story instead of being a cautionary example in somebody's training slide. I walked into my supervisor's office and told her that I had reason to believe I was personally connected to a matter that might come into our unit, that I was requesting my own records as a private individual and not through any system I had access to at work, and that I was recusing myself. In plain words, I took my own hands off it, in writing. Before I touched anything, she asked me 2 questions, and then she said, "Don't open the envelope at your desk. I want that sentence on my headstone." The envelope came 11 days later, 406 pages. I brought it home and I put it on my kitchen table, and I sat down in front of it at 7 p.m. with a glass of water, and I did not open it for about 20 minutes. Here is what was in it. Page 1, asterisk, the provider enrollment form. My handwriting. My real signature. Dated 2 months after I moved into that house. The boring page. The one Cheryl called just the paperwork so the county can send a nurse out. It is a completely valid document, and there is nothing wrong with it at all. And that is exactly why it worked. Page 20 is where my hands got cold. Page 2 is a direct deposit authorization, the form that tells the state which bank account to send the money to. Same date, same folder, and the signature at the bottom of page 2 was my name. In a hand that leans backward, I write forward. I have written forward since I was 7. The account number ended in 4198. I had never in my life had an account ending in 4198. It was opened at a branch on West 26th Street, 8 days after that Tuesday morning with the travel mug of coffee, and it had 2 names on the signature card, mine, and as attorney in fact, which is the fancy term for the person a power of attorney, let's sign for you. My Aunt Cheryl. Except a power of attorney lets you sign for the person who gave it to you. My grandmother gave her that power. I never did. Page 3 was the one that made me stand up and walk to the sink and stand there for a while. Page 3 was the payment history. 1 line. Paramount. $960, $960, $960. Going down the page, like a heartbeat on a monitor. 68 lines, 68 payments, at $960 each. $65,280. I'm going to give you that number a second way, because a number that size just slides past your ear otherwise. That is a down payment on a house, on my street. That is every rent check I have written since I walked out of that driveway. All of them, plus another year of them stacked on top. That is a hospital bed rental every month for 27 years. And I could not get one for one night. Do not do that arithmetic yourself. I already did it about 400 times, standing at that sink. And then, stay with me, because this is the part where it stopped being about money. I got to the last 4 lines of page 3. The payments did not stop when she died. 3 more went out after the funeral. The last one landed 11 weeks after we buried her. Somebody billed the state of Pennsylvania for me, taking care of a woman who was in the ground at Trinity Memorial with a laminated program. Now let me tell you about the blue sheets, because that is what I started calling them out loud in my own kitchen, alone, like a crazy person. Pages 11 through 406 were the timesheets. In that program, they're actually white with a blue header, and I had read maybe 9,000 of them at work, and I had never once thought about what it would be like to read my own. Each one covers a 2-week period. Each one has a grid of dates and hours. Each one has 2 signature lines at the bottom. The top line says, caregiver. The bottom line says, recipient of services. 68 months of them. Every single sheet on the caregiver line. My name in that backward, leaning hand. Some of those sheets claimed 40 hours in a week. Some claimed 28. There is a cap in the program, and whoever filled these out knew the cap, and never once went over it in 6 years. That is not greed. Greed makes mistakes. That is bookkeeping. And on the recipient line, sheet after sheet, my grandmother's name, in a signature that got shakier and shakier across the years, exactly the way a real one would, until it didn't. Because here is the thing about a person with a stroke, and then dementia, and then hospice. Her handwriting has a story, and I had 5 years and 11 months of that story in a shoebox under my cot. The last 22 timesheets have a recipient signature that is steady, steadier than the ones from 4 years earlier, steadier than the ones from before her stroke. A clean, confident version of my grandmother's name on 22 sheets during a stretch when I was holding a cup with a straw in it to her mouth with both hands, and she could not lift a spoon. And the last 3 of those sheets are dated after her funeral. You already know what I did. I sat there at my own kitchen table at something like 11:40 p.m. with 406 pages spread across it. And I did not cry. And I want you to notice that. Because I told you earlier there was only one time. And I meant it. I was past crying. What I felt was the specific, quiet, almost pleasant sensation I get at work when a claim finally lines up with a death certificate. It was the first time in my life I was grateful for the way I turned out. Then I went and got the shoebox off my closet shelf. 241 pages, both sides, in my forward-leaning handwriting. Every dose, every turn, every hour, dated, initialed. 5 years and 11 months of nights. Kept because a bored nurse once told me to. I laid the notebooks beside the timesheets, and for the first time in 6 years, somebody was going to read them. If you have somebody in your family who does all the caring and none of the deciding, send this to them. Not for the ending, for the notebook. Tell them to write it down. Tell them the boring version is the version that holds up. 3 days later, I filed a complaint, not a phone call to my aunt, not a family meeting, not a message to my mother, who by then I spoke to maybe 3 times a year, at holidays, for 11 minutes. I filed a written complaint with my own unit as a member of the public, attaching my records request, my recusal memo, the 406 pages, and copies, not originals, because I know how chain of custody works, of 241 notebook pages. It went to an investigator 2 floors up, who I had said good morning to for 3 years, and had never had a conversation with. I'll call her the investigator because she is a role in my life and not a friend, and because she was so scrupulously professional with me that I never once heard her use my first name. She came down on a Thursday with the shoebox in an evidence bag and gloves on, and she asked me one question about page 1. She held up the enrollment form, my real signature, the only page I ever signed, and she said, Is this the only document in this file you signed? I said yes. She said, then this is the easiest one I've had all year. The state sent my aunt a letter. It is a standard letter. I've watched it go out 100 times. It says an inquiry has been opened regarding payments made under a specified provider number. It lists the date range, and it gives you 14 days to respond in writing. She got it on a Saturday. She called me 11 times that day. Here's the thing I had learned in 3 years at that job. And it is the only strategic thing I did in this entire story. When somebody like my aunt is caught, she does not want a lawyer. She wants a conversation. A conversation is where she is undefeated. A conversation has no exhibits. So I let it go to voicemail 9 times. And on the 11th, I texted her 4 words. Public place. Thursday. Noon. No. We met at a coffee shop on Peach Street. She got there first because of course she did, and she had already bought me a coffee. Because of course she had, and she'd put it at the seat across from her, where it would be waiting. I didn't touch it. She started exactly where I knew she'd start. She said, Nora, I don't know what somebody has told you, but this is a misunderstanding, and I need you to know I have never in my life taken a dime that wasn't. And I said, I am not here to argue with you. I am here to tell you 5 things, and then I am going to leave. I had them written on an index card. I'd practiced them in my car in the parking lot for 6 minutes. Not because I was afraid, because I know what I sound like when I am angry, and I wanted the record to be flat. Puan. Asterisk, asterisk. The provider enrollment I signed at that kitchen table created a payment account in my name. You submitted a direct deposit form 8 days later, in my name, for an account I have never had access to. I have both pages. They're in the same folder, 1 page apart. 2. Asterisk, asterisk, 68 payments went into that account, $960 each. $65,280 total. I have the payment history. 3. Asterisk, asterisk. Every timesheet has my signature on the caregiver line. I never saw one of those sheets in my life. The last 22 of them have Grandma's signature on the recipient line, and it is steadier than the ones from 4 years before, and 3 of them are dated after her funeral. She said my name once. In the middle of that one, I kept going. 4. Asterisk, asterisk. I did the work. Every hour on every one of those sheets. Somebody actually did. I have 5 years and 11 months of contemporaneous logs in my handwriting. And the state has them now. And they match the sheets, almost hour for hour. That is not a defense for you. That is the thing that proves the hours were real, and the person who got paid for them wasn't. 5. Asterisk, asterisk. I have recused myself. I am not the investigator. I am the complainant. There is no version of this where you call somebody at my office and get it handled. And if you try, the person you call has to document that you tried. Then I stood up, she said, and I have thought about this for a long time, because I expected shouting, and she does not shout, and she gave me instead the most honest sentence she has ever said to me. She said, you were going to get all of it eventually. The house. Everything. What was the difference? I said, 4M. She didn't understand. She looked at me like I'd spoken another language. I said, that was the difference. Every night, at 4 a.m., the difference between us was about 8 feet of hallway, and you were never in it. And I said the last thing, which was the only line I'd rehearsed, and the only one I'd have taken back, if I were a better person. Except, I wouldn't, I said. You told me family doesn't send invoices. You were right. So, I didn't send you one, I sent it to the people who pay the ones you wrote in my name. Then I left the coffee she bought me sitting on the table, and I walked out into the parking lot, and I did not cry. And I drove to work, and I finished a queue of 11 claims before 5 p.m. Here is what happened after, and I am going to give it to you flat, because flat is how it actually arrives. Nothing about this part is dramatic. That is what makes it a verdict instead of a fight. The finding came out 91 days later, 14 pages. In plain words, it said 3 things. The hours were real. The caregiver was me, and the money went somewhere it should not have. The provider number was closed, not mine anymore, and not usable by anybody else. Ever. The recoupment order, that is the state's demand to get its money back, was for the full $65,280 against my aunt personally, plus a penalty of $32,640, just under $98,000, from a woman who had told me there was nothing there for a $200 bed. The file went to the county district attorney. I want to be honest about how that ended, because I know what you want, and this genre likes handcuffs. There were no handcuffs. She was 59 years old with no record and a very good lawyer, and she pleaded to 1 count and got probation and a restitution order. But the restitution order named a victim, and the victim it named was me. $300 a month, direct from her, through the county, into an account with only my name on it. She will be paying me until she is 81 years old. 81. The same age my grandmother was on the night. She lay on a bathroom floor, with the storm door open, because there was nothing there. Second thing, the witness line on that enrollment form had a notary stamp on it. A notary is just somebody the state licenses to watch you sign and swear you were really in the room. The stamp on my page belonged to my aunt. She'd been a notary for 19 years. For the church, for the neighbors, for everybody's refinance. You cannot notarize a document you are a party to. Not in Pennsylvania. Not anywhere. The commission was revoked in August. Her journal, the log every notary has to keep, got pulled and reviewed for 4 other years of entries. Third thing, and it is the smallest one, and it is the one she actually feels. She was the treasurer of her church for 11 years. She counted the collection. She did their books. She was very, very good at it. They accepted her resignation in September. She has time now. I know she does, because of the messages. 31 voicemails. In the first 4 months, not one apology in any of them. Not one. I've listened to all of them, once each, in the car, in the parking garage, which is apparently where I do my hardest listening. They go in a cycle. First, it is that she is worried about me. Then it is that I've been manipulated by people at that job who don't know this family. Then it is that my grandmother would be devastated. Then it is an email, 4 paragraphs, about how she gave up her 40s for that woman too, and nobody ever thanked her, and how a family is not a business, and how she forgives me. Twice she came to the lobby of my building. Both times she signed the visitor log at the security desk with her real name, in her real handwriting, which leans backward, and both times security called up and I said, in a completely normal voice, I am not available, and please note the time. My mother sent 1 message. She said I'd torn the family in half over money, and that she hoped it was worth it. I typed 4 different answers, and sent none of them. I sent nothing. She has been calling for 11 months now, twice a year, on holidays, and I let it ring, and I have not decided anything permanent. And I don't have to. That is the thing. Nobody tells you about the quiet version of this. You don't win by having the last word. You win by no longer being in the conversation. I did not get my family back, and I am not going to stand here and tell you I got something better, because that is a lie people tell, to make an ending sound like a gift. I got my time back. That is all. It is smaller than what I lost, and it is the only thing that was ever actually available. But there was one thread left, and it came to me in October, on a Saturday, in the parking lot of a hardware store, which is where the real things in my life apparently happen. My cousin Danny is 21. He is my aunt's son. When I moved into that house, he was 15, and he came over exactly twice, both times because he'd been made to. And both times he sat on the arm of the couch looking at his phone. While I changed a bed in the next room, he texted me. He asked if he could give me something. He was standing next to his car with a plastic grocery bag, and he was so nervous he shook my hand, which nobody in my family has ever done. He said, they're selling the chest of drawers, the one from Grandma's room. I was cleaning it out. He had found something in the bottom drawer, under a folded tablecloth, and he had not given it to his mother. It was a notebook, not one of mine. Mine are blue, and from the drugstore, on Buffalo Road. This one was a green memo pad with a cardboard cover, the kind they sell by the register, and it was written in pencil, and I knew the handwriting before I got it out of the bag. My grandmother had been keeping her own log. It starts about 4 months after I moved in. The entries are short, and they're not about medicine, and every single one of them is about me. Nora, up at 4. Again. N. Did the tub today. 2 hours. She missed her friend's wedding. Said she didn't want to go. She wanted to go. Nora. 14 hours. Page after page. Not every day. There are gaps where she was in the hospital, and long gaps in the last year, when her hands stopped working. But it goes on for almost 5 years. She was counting my hours, in pencil, in a drawer, 8 feet down the hall from where I slept. And she never told me, and I never knew. And she asked me on one clear afternoon, 3 weeks before she died, whether they were paying me. Count it, she said. She had been counting it the entire time. The last entry is from about 7 months before she died, and it is 4 words, and the letters are enormous and unsteady. The way handwriting goes when someone is holding the pencil with a whole fist. Nora, all day, nobody counts her. I count her. I sat in that parking lot with a hardware store bag on my knees, and I did not cry. And I want to be clear that this is not toughness. I had already spent my one time on it in a driveway. 5 years earlier, before I knew any of this, whatever was left came out some other way. It came out as a kind of stillness that lasted about 3 days. I gave a copy of that green notebook to the investigator because it was relevant, and it turned out to be the piece that made the restitution order name me instead of only the state. But here is what I want you to sit with, and it is the reason I bothered telling you any of this. For 6 years, I believed nobody in that house saw me. That was the actual injury, not the money. I mean it, and I am the one who got the money. The injury was believing I had been in a room for 6 years and left no mark on it, and the whole time, in a drawer, in pencil. Somebody was keeping the record. Bev was right and wrong on the same morning. Everybody in that house was counting Grandma's hours, but somebody was counting mine. She just couldn't get out of bed to tell me. 2 things sit on a shelf in my apartment now. I want to leave you with both of them, and then I'll let you go. The first is a white plastic egg timer with a hairline crack across the face. I have not wound it to time another person's medication since a Sunday afternoon in March 6 years ago, when I let it run out on purpose. I do wind it now, maybe twice a week. I set it for 20 minutes, and I sit down in a chair by the window. And for those 20 minutes, I do not answer anything, fix anything, turn anyone, or check on anyone. When it runs down, I usually stay in the chair anyway. For 6 years, that timer measured how long I had, until somebody needed me again. Now, it measures how long nobody gets to. The second thing is a blue spiral notebook from a drugstore on Buffalo Road. Same brand. I am on my third one since I left. The entries are different. Now, they're not doses. Last Tuesday says, walked to the lake, cold. Got the certificate, renewal in. Danny called. That is it. That is the whole entry. It is a boring page in a boring book that nobody but me will ever read. Except that isn't true anymore, is it? Because I know now what a boring, faithfully kept notebook can do to a person who thought no record was being made. They were right about one thing. My family, all those years, at every table, in that patient, kind, unhurried voice. Family doesn't send invoices. That is true. Family doesn't send invoices. Family keeps a record. My grandmother kept hers in pencil, in a drawer, where nobody was looking. For 5 years. I kept mine in blue spiral notebooks under a cot for 5 years and 11 months. Because a bored nurse told me to, and because I am the kind of person who does the boring thing correctly. And between the two of us, one woman who couldn't get out of bed, and one woman nobody in that house ever asked a single question, we wrote down enough of the truth to close an account, revoke a stamp, empty a chair at a church board table, and put $300 a month into a bank account that has exactly one name on it. If you are the one keeping everybody else's hours right now, the one on the cot, the one with the headlamp, the one who is told there is nothing there, I am not going to tell you to leave. I don't know your house. I don't know your grandmother. I am going to tell you what a woman with forearms, like a bricklayer, told me on a Tuesday morning in a room that smelled like soap. Nobody's counting your hours, so count them yourself. Get a $1.79 notebook. Write down the date, the time, and what you did. Do it badly. Do it every night. Do it for years, in a handwriting that leans forward, and put it in a shoebox under the bed. You will probably never need it. And if you ever do, it will be the most honest thing in the house.